It's easy to think of modern medicine as this straight line, a story of singular European genius. But what if the real story is so much more connected, more complex, and honestly, way more fascinating? Today, we're digging into the hidden history of medicine, a story of how knowledge was passed from hand to hand across the ages. Let's jump in. It's a huge question, isn't it? We totally take for granted our hospitals, our understanding of the human body, all the medicines that keep us healthy. But the journey to get here? Well, it wasn't a solo sprint. It was a global marathon. And really, the best way to picture this whole journey is to think of it like a giant relay race. Each great civilization didn't start from scratch. Nope. They grabbed the baton of knowledge from the one before, ran their leg of the race as hard as they could, and then passed it on. Each time, a little faster, a little further. All right, so who are the first runners in this incredible race for medical know-how? Let's wind the clock all the way back to the starting line. The race kicks off with some absolute giants. In Egypt, you had this amazing mix of sharp observation and ritual, all captured in texts like the Ebers Papyrus. Then the Greeks, with guys like Hippocrates and Galen, they grabbed the baton. And they changed the game, shifting the focus to rationalism, trying to figure out the natural causes of diseases, even using dissection. This was the foundation they were about to pass on. So for centuries, the work of the Greeks, especially Galen, was pretty much the final word on medicine. But as Europe was heading into the Middle Ages, a powerful new runner stepped onto the track, ready to take that baton and completely transform the race: the scholars of the Islamic Golden Age. In these buzzing, intellectual centers, like Baghdad's famous House of Wisdom, something incredible started happening. These scholars didn't just, copy the old Greek texts. Not at all. They translated everything, Greek, Persian, Indian knowledge, and then they debated it, tested it, and massively built on it. They weren't just librarians. They were true innovators. And this innovation wasn't just theoretical. They put it into practice. A perfect example is the Bimaristan. This wasn't just a place to put sick people. It was a direct forerunner to our modern hospitals, with specialized wards for different illnesses, pharmacies, and even teaching facilities for the next generation of doctors. It was a total revolution in how you care for people. So, how did they do all this? Well, they had a method, a system that was genuinely scientific. First, they'd translate all the existing works. Then, they'd enhance it with their own observations. Step 3, and this is crucial, they'd experiment to test the theories. And finally, they documented everything. This rigorous approach was the engine that drove all their discoveries. Okay, so they had this powerful new method. What did they actually find? Well, this is where they didn't just run their leg of the race. This is where they blew past everyone and created a huge lead for all of humanity. Okay, let's take one of the most basic things about our bodies: how blood flows. For over 1,000 years, the world just accepted Galen's theory that blood somehow passed through invisible pores in the wall of the heart, which we now know is just wrong. Then, in the 13th century, a physician named Ibn al-Nafis figured it out. He correctly described pulmonary circulation, how blood goes from the heart to the lungs for oxygen and then back to the heart. It was a massive breakthrough, and get this, it was over 300 years before it was widely understood in Europe. Okay, what is this number? 200 plus, what? It's a number that completely changed what was even possible in the world of medicine. That number represents the more than 200 surgical instruments that were introduced by a man named al-Zaharwawi. This guy was a genius. He wrote a 30-volume encyclopedia on medicine and surgery that covered everything. He is quite literally called the father of modern surgery, and his tools and his techniques became the foundation for operations for hundreds of years. And the list of these pioneers just goes on and on. There was Al-Razi, or Raziz, a giant in clinical medicine. He was the very first person to clearly describe the difference between smallpox and measles, a huge deal for diagnosing disease. He brought in alcohol as an antiseptic, he pushed for controlled experiments, and he was a huge advocate for medical ethics. Just a true powerhouse. And then you have Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna. His masterpiece, The Canon of Medicine, was this epic work that brought together basically all known medical knowledge. Its impact was just staggering. After it got translated into Latin, it became the standard medical textbook in Europe for more than 500 years. It was one of the first books ever printed and was still being used in universities well into the 17th century. Incredible.
So you've got this unbelievable collection of knowledge, all enhanced, tested, and documented. The next critical phase of this whole relay race was passing that baton westward, back into Europe. This huge handoff happened in these vibrant translation centers in places like Toledo, Spain, and Sicily, Italy. Here, masterpieces like Ibn Sina's Canon and al-Zahrawi's work on surgery were carefully translated from Arabic into Latin. This wasn't just about swapping texts, it was the transfer of a brand new evidence-based foundation for medicine that was about to set the European Renaissance on fire.
And oh boy, did it ever catch fire. With this new foundation beneath their feet, European scholars were now in the perfect position to run the next leg of the race, building directly on the incredible work that had just been handed to them. A perfect example is the great anatomist Andreas Vesalius. When he started doing his own human dissections and proved many of Galen's ancient ideas wrong, he wasn't just being a rebel for the sake of it. He was applying the very principle that Islamic scholars had championed for centuries. Trust what you can directly observe and prove. Don't just blindly follow ancient authorities. Now, let's just quickly circle back to that huge discovery about blood flow. Remember Ibn al-Nafis, the physician who correctly figured out pulmonary circulation way back in the 13th century? That critical piece of the puzzle was documented. It was sitting there, waiting. And then, more than 300 years later, the English physician William Harvey famously describes the full circulatory system. He's celebrated for it, and rightfully so. But it is so important to understand he was not working in a vacuum. He was building on the intellectual foundation laid centuries earlier by Ibn al-Nafis. This is the relay race in action. One discovery makes the next one possible. So when you step back and you look at the whole picture, the story just completely changes. It stops being about one culture winning a race, and it becomes about a shared journey toward a single common goal. And this quote just says it all perfectly. The real history of medicine isn't some simple story of one civilization's victory. It's the story of all of humanity's shared, connected effort to understand and preserve life. A story of passing the baton of wisdom from Egypt to Greece to the Islamic world to Renaissance Europe and on and on. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, if this huge part of medical history was essentially hidden in plain sight, what other amazing stories of shared human progress are just out there, waiting for us to uncover them? Thanks for watching.